colleague has said, it is in fact a very uneconomical and not the most accessible way of, not the most accessible form of energy in that region. My final point is a point which my learned colleague has failed to raise, which is a point on national sovereignty. My argument is that national sovereignty is recognized in international law as not being unfettered, but there are certain limits, and where an act of a state undermines international peace, then such acts should be prohibited. So on to my first point. My learned colleague has already raised the point that there are sufficient political triggers in the Middle East to encourage these nations, if they have a civilian nuclear technology, to develop nuclear weapons, and as we have seen recently with Iran. My point is that not only is there a political trigger, technologically it is very, very easy to go from civilian to nuclear weapons. But the third point is that currently, under the international scheme, under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and also the inspection done by the International Atomic Energy Agency, that detection and monitoring is inefficient. Now, without going into too much details of the NPT itself, a few examples will suffice here. For example, we have Iraq and we have North Korea. Both of these countries are parties to the NPT. And when they were under the watchful eye of the IAEA, they managed to develop nuclear weapons using their civilian nuclear bases. And the point is, you don't need to have a separate nuclear weapons base. It's quite possible, and this is what these countries did, is to highly enhance the uranium within their own nuclear power plants. So from the outside, say from satellite imagery, it looks like they're doing nothing wrong. And another point is, another flaw with the NPT is that countries such as North Korea, as they have done 2 years ago, they can simply withdraw from the NPT. All they have to do is give a 3 months notice, which is not very long. In fact, if I want to quit my job, it would probably require 6 months notice. So the point is, it's quite easy to get out of this scheme. And once you're out, then these other international agencies do not have a right to enter your country to inspect your power plants. Little bit later on, thanks. And so that is the scene here. No technological prohibitions, no political prohibitions, and no international prohibitions at the moment to prevent these countries to go from civilian to nuclear weapons. My second point is that even if some states express a will that they don't want to develop civilian weapons, obviously it's not all up to the states. We have non-state parties. And non-state parties are quite important, they're wealthy, and they have enough money. As my friend has said, there is a lot of poverty in the Middle East. And unfortunately, because all humans are infallible, all humans are fallible, the point is poverty leads to corruption. And as you can see in Russia, a lot of scientists have been selling their nuclear waste and their nuclear uranium, highly enhanced uranium, weapons-grade uranium, to outside parties. In the Middle East, that is very likely to happen because of the inherent poverty in that region, and that is a sad fact. My next point is that nuclear technology, even if it can be used for purely civilian purposes, yes?
Could you explain, because I'm failing to see how this is affected, how your resolution would have any impact whatsoever on non-state actors?
Being non-state.
Well, the current trend of international law not only focuses on states, and I think certainly with the most recent decisions on the International Court of Justice, they have shifted the focus not on only states but also non-state actors. And there are certain means to prevent them from having power. One way is to impose asset freeze on their bank accounts, and that is quite viable. Okay, back to my main
information.
A bit later on.
Integrations deal.
I'm sorry?
Okay.
Anyway, my next point is that even if you do have purely civilian nuclear power plants, that does not work well in the Middle East. Firstly, the Middle East is a very unstable country. Nuclear power plants, in order to provide sufficient or a significant portion of power in the Middle East, you need hundreds of them. And they produce thousands and thousands of tons of dangerous nuclear waste. In fact, a fresh nuclear waste, if you're exposed to it for less than a minute, that could cause death. The point is you have to store it somewhere. Now, no thanks. You have to store it somewhere. It's quite difficult to do so in the Middle East because it is a very unstable country, an unstable region, unfortunately. And there is bombings. We hear about this all over the news. and it's quite difficult to find a place to store them, and mind you, you need to store it for over 10,000 years. My next point is that nuclear technology for civilian purposes is not the most beneficial technology for the Middle East. Middle East is sitting, geographically, it's better to have geothermal technology and solar technology. They are much cheaper. You have a nuclear power plant. If you have 1,000 nuclear power plants, you've got trillions and trillions of dollars. And I'm aware that Middle Eastern countries are seeking to reinvest their oil, the revenue they made from oil in alternative forms of energy. But my suggestion is not for them to invest in nuclear technology, but to invest in alternative technology. And if they are successful, they can easily market these new technologies to all nations around the world. My final point is about sovereignty. Now, a lot of states like to claim that we have the sovereign right to have nuclear technology. We have the right as states to do anything we want to. But that might be the old view in international law, but not the current view. The current view certainly recognizes that there are certain limits to national sovereignty. The very concept of jus cogens, rules of international law that cannot be breached by any nation under any circumstances, is such a recognition. The point is, international community is like a human community. Everyone has rights, yes, but their rights must be limited so that everyone can coexist peacefully. And as my first speaker has argued, and as I have argued, there are sufficient reasons to doubt, there are sufficient reasons to conclude, to reasonably conclude, that if we have any nuclear technology, even if it is civilian, it would inevitably lead to weapons development, or even if it doesn't lead to weapons development, it's going to cause safety hazards because of storage difficulties. And these are going to have not only its impact on the peace of the region, but peace internationally. And therefore, our proposal is in fact not against international law, but in fact reinforcing the fundamental notion of international law of international peace. That is in my speech. Thank you very much.
Information, since there's some time remaining.
No.
It's not really good, so it's not really good action time.
Oh, okay. Yes, go ahead.
I fail to understand how your UN resolution, which condemns nuclear weapons, which is going to have going to sort of launch perhaps a financial bomb against Iran, which is going to asset freeze non-state actors such as Hezbollah, Hamas, doesn't think new. I was fully aware the United Nations resolution was passed. I apologise. Could you please answer?
How
is this different? How is this really going to get to grips with the issues?
Well, this actually calls for the participation of certain parties around the world, not just the United Kingdom, obviously, but I think the United Kingdom is in one of the best positions to propose this because it is a permanent member of the Security Council. I think generally every country in the world, not just the United Kingdom, but even the United States, would want everlasting peace in the Middle East, and this is an essential way to achieve it. And because this is an essential way, we think that having put such strong arguments forward to this House, and we shall replicate these arguments before the United States and other countries, and to show them and to really convince them that in order to achieve peace, this is a resolution for them to adopt.
So can you please clarify your point? It's not saying anything new.
Yeah, sorry.